I did a lot of stuff. I mean, I won't get into details. Like I said, it's stuff I'm not proud of, but I did a lot of stuff, a lot of bad stuff. In 1972, my mom and my dad separated, and we moved to Chicago. I quickly became a man, being the oldest son in the house. I feel like I was robbed of my childhood. I don't remember a whole lot about my childhood with my father. My father was never in my life. Even when he was there, he wasn't there. It just was no relationship at all. It was a rough neighborhood. There were gangs, drugs, but I felt comfortable there because that is what I became to know, and that was really my family. The gang bangers, the drug dealers, and that's who I learned from. I decided I would go into the military because I wanted to make a life for myself. I wanted to be something that make my mom proud. Once I got into the Army, that's when I first did some cocaine. I started doing a lot of LSD, and I seen an opportunity to make a lot more money. That's when I really got into the drug dealing while I was in the military, because I could come back to rent to Chicago and get drugs really cheap and go back and more than double my money. Now I wasn't working for anybody. I was my own man. I was growing into the man that I didn't want to become. When I got out of the military, I came back home to Chicago, and I hooked back up with my high school sweetheart, my wife Ida, and right away I started a family. In 1991, I visited Rochester. My mom had moved to Rochester in '81 right after I got out of the military, but Rochester wasn't a place I wanted to come to because it wasn't a life that I wanted to live. We left Rochester and went back to Chicago after visiting. Right after we got home and got our bags unpacked, there was a shooting. And I looked out the window right on our steps, and I watched a guy get killed. And at that point I said, I gotta get my family out here. This is not safe. I want a life for my family, and I'm tired of this life. I want a better life for me too. And I knew what I had seen in Rochester, that this could offer the chance to give me the life that I wanted. When I moved to Rochester, I accepted a job with IBM, and for about 6 months, life was really great. I had pretty much given up everything, and shortly after I'd taken the job with IBM, there was this massive layoff. And when I got laid off, I wanted again to know, how am I gonna support my family again? But instead of me going to look for another job, I decided to take my check and go to Chicago and get back in the game. I was going to Chicago like going across the street. I would go to Chicago in the morning, and I would be back at night before anybody knew I was gone. I would go to Chicago and get my drugs, and I would come here and I would mark the prices up so, because I was making 3 to 4 times more than what I was paying for the drug. Because there was a lot of money to be made, I decided to make drug dealing my life. "1992, this is where it all started. Apartment G30 right up at the top of the stairs, all the way on the front side.
This is where your kids were raised?
This is where the kids was raised. My youngest son, Muhammad, was 18 months when we moved here. And I can remember a lot of good memories from Rochester Village. But I can also remember running around from different apartments, selling drugs and doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. Well, I would walk actually out of this door, and I would go through that door over there and out of the back door over to Burger King, and that's where I would make a lot of drug deals there. I chose that path, even though I still held jobs, and I still was trying to maintain a life that my kids could be proud of. I was living what's called a double life. I did an interview with Rochester Magazine, I want to say 2008 maybe was. And a lot of people that read that magazine said, well, why did you put that in there? You never been on heroin? But a lot of people knew me, so yeah, he was. Yeah. The people who knew me as Walter the professional, youth football coach, youth basketball coach, a father, a hard-working man, they admired me, they would pat me and they would praise me. Yet, there were people that I sold drugs to that feared me because I was ruthless and I would do whatever it take to get my point across. This building here used to be known as the Aquarius Club. I remember a lot of wild nights here, leaving there drunk, don't even know how I got home the next day. If I came here, 9 out of 10 times, I was gonna be in a fight before I left. It was just that someone either rubbed against me, bumped against me, or looked at me in the wrong way. They had bouncers down there with rough guys up, but I was one that they wasn't gonna tackle, so whatever I wanted to do, I did it. You know, I sit right there at the table and sold drugs. I snort drugs right off the table. I party. My wife, she known, but at the time, you know, I was pretty abusive. You know, as long as I am supporting you, putting food in your mouth, the roof over your head, don't question me about what I do. This used to be the Aviary's Bar and Grill. They had great food here, but the drinks, I used to come for the drinks, very little for the food. And I just drink till they get ready, everybody go home that night. I should have been home at that time with my family. I had kids I should have been home with, getting them ready for school or something the next day. Yet I'm hanging out with my friends here, you know, trying to impress them. I always had run-ins with the law, but I started to get more and more into serious trouble. The assaults started to pile up, and there were some serious assaults. First degree, second degree, and fifth degree assaults. I would always beat them, regardless of what, because you had to show up in court to make these things happen. And if a guy showed up in court to testify against me, he knew it wasn't gonna be good. So they would never show up in court. So I used to say, you know, I was smarter than the average bear. I could never get myself into anything that I couldn't get out of. Good. I had the power I've always wanted. I'm the man. I'm untouchable. I can probably look at different spots in this parking lot and says, you know, I can remember slapping a guy right in the front of the club. He was supposed to be a tough guy. And I was sitting there talking with someone, he comes up, and I slapped him and said, when grown people talking, you shut up. And I remember punching a guy right as we walked out of the door, Mike Murphy's. It was just so many bad memories here, you know, and it's a place that, you know, I just don't even want to think about anymore. You know, it sort of pains me to even be here. In 2001, I was raided. And the funny part about that is because 3 days before I was raided, I prayed that God would take that life that I was living away from me. I had had an 18-and-a-half-year run with heroin. I was sick, I was tired, and I knew that God had a better plan for me because what I was doing wasn't what he had planned for me, because I never wanted that life, but yet I lived it. See, people have these perceptions of drug addicts, you know, and I'm telling you, that's not true. A lot of drug addicts, you don't know that they're addicts. It was just my last couple of years, like I say, that we got out of control. Police captain here, he was like my best friend.
You didn't know either?
Oh, he was so upset with me when he found out when I got arrested, you know. Well, when the police came, I can remember them kicking my door in, and they dragged me out of my house in my underwear. And I said, no problem, I'll be out by lunch anyway, no big deal. Little did I know that my wife wasn't gonna bail me out. because she was sick and tired of the man I had became, and she didn't want no more parts of that life. And I was really upset with her when I called her to come get me, and she wouldn't. Right around the corner on the second floor up there is where I was housed at for 8 months. My room was in there. Well, I just lay there with my heroin withdrawals, and it didn't make a difference because I feel I was gonna die anyway, you know. I was just gonna lay there and die and nobody was gonna care. After I was in jail about 30 days, and I started to sober up and started to feel like I can function without drugs, I would start to pray, and I would just ask him to give me a better life, you know. But I kept hearing everybody talk about Jesus. That's when I met Andy Kylan while I was in Olmsted County Jail. And he starts to talk about Jesus and how Jesus can transform a life. That's when I decided that I wanted what he had, and what he had was Jesus, and I needed that in my life. It was here. It was here where I met Jesus. This is where I had my encounter with Jesus at. And that's when he became real to me, you know. Before, it was just something I've heard, so I always thought that it was an old thing, you know, that's what he died for. But it was actually for me, and I realize now that if I'd been the only one, he still would have died. And that means a lot to me, to know that someone personally died for me. I started to realize that what a wretched man I was. I started to really dig into the Bible. I started praying. I mentioned the name Andy Kylan. This man that used to come into the Bible come into jail to do Bible studies. When I came home from prison, it was on a Tuesday. That was the first call I made. I said, Andy, I'm home today. What do I do? And he'd taken me over to the Rochester Network for reentry. Now, I didn't need a place to stay. I just needed a place to belong. So I started to just get involved with Next Chapter Ministries. And then we started to go to all these outreach conferences. And 3 years later, I was actually doing the same thing that Andy was doing the day that I met him in the county jail. He had pretty much turned that ministry over to me. And I mean, it made a difference because this man had believed in me from day one, still to the day, and has played a vital part in my life. I don't have any good memories from my past, especially the waking up with the hangovers or waking up, you know, you can't get up and function without using drugs. The life is not a life I would recommend to anybody. And I really, when I see someone going through this here, it pains me because life don't have to be this way. I just went to Damascus Way after 10 years with Next Chapter Ministries. Damascus Way is a licensed DOC halfway house. We work with men who has been released early. They have a job, they have housing, they have restored relationship with families, they belong to a church, they have a support group. And my job at Damascus is to sort of make that happen. As a volunteer, I'm able to go back into the same jail that I was housed for 8 months and meet one-on-one with guys. And they used to bring me in through the back door, through the garage. Now I walk in through the front door and they, hey, Walter, good to see you. Who are you coming to see today? It's just how God can just take what everybody see as a negative and turn it into something positive. No, was I happy about being housed there in the county jail for 8 months? No. But in a sense, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a life-saving adventure, you know, because if I didn't end up in Olmsted County Jail and in the Minnesota State prisons, I'd probably be dead today. Because God can use anybody. If God can use me, he can use anybody, because I just know my life and the things that I've done, that it would no way that he could ever use me. When I came to Christ, I always wished that I had a story like Paul to tell, and his trip and his road to Damascus? Well, I do have that story to tell.
Do you like the new you?
I love the new man. I love the new man. I mean, it's great. There was a time in my life where I was just like this boarder. I was just like the Aquarius Club. My life was broken. It was shut down. I was headed to nowhere. I was headed to a dead end. Then I decided to put all this down, and that's where I picked up the cross. That's where I found life in Jesus. There's no life outside of Jesus. All the others is gone and past. This is forever. This is eternal. Thanks be to God. My name is Walter Bush, and I'm a story of hope.